Hello, welcome back to Drinking by Myself. My name is Emma, and I now live on my own. That's too hot. Don't burn yourself, Emma. I am 30 years old, and this is the first time in my whole life I've ever lived by myself, so it is a bit of an adjustment period, especially for someone like me who really loves a lot of human contact. I'm not used to spending any time on my own, really. I've said to people before that I have like a 45-minute limit. For 45 minutes, being by myself can be lovely. I can do what I want. I don't have to answer to anyone. But at the end of 45 minutes, I suddenly find myself horizontal on the ground because I am so bored and lonely. So as I said, living by myself has been an adjustment, but luckily, books are always your friends. So in this video, I'm going to talk about books and some other things that have really helped my mental health, and I think are going to be particularly valuable to me as I learn to live by myself. And this video is very kindly sponsored by BetterHelp. So BetterHelp is this really amazing, more accessible, more affordable way to get access to therapy, and I am a huge fan of having therapy. I've been in therapy for years. I haven't personally gone through BetterHelp because I've been going through the private therapy route. I've needed a lot of therapy in my time, but I think that BetterHelp is such an amazing company. And I actually, right this morning, just before filming, was reading a study from the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute that was talking about how BetterHelp provides therapy that is just as effective as kind of traditional face-to-face therapy. So how BetterHelp works, they have this network of over 20,000 therapists, so a really broad range of knowledge and broad range of expertise. You set up your account, fill in some information about you and what you're looking for, and then BetterHelp will match you to your perfect therapist. And of course, they want you to get the exact right person for you, so it is really easy and free to switch therapists if you want to talk to somebody else. But once you set up your account, within 48 hours, you'll be ready to start talking to a therapist. So that is incredible. It takes away so much of the waiting time that can exist in over here. Waiting to get a therapist on the NHS can be a huge wait time, and if you're really in need, it's fantastic that you can get up and running so quickly. Once you're matched with your therapist, you can schedule weekly video calls or phone calls. You can also send your therapist a message whenever you would like and receive a timely, thoughtful response. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, it is professional therapy done securely online, but it's just a new way of doing it. So therapy is really something I would recommend to anyone. Getting to talk about your feelings with someone who is not judging you and doesn't have their own biases and interests in the situation is just, I've found, invaluable always. And BetterHelp is a really great, efficient and affordable way of doing that. Financial aid is also available just to make it even more accessible. And if you use my link, you can get 10% off your first month. So to do that, go to betterhelp.com, that's betterhelp.com/drinkingbymyshelf. I'll also put the link in the description box below, so you can click that and get 10% off your first month. Is my tea still too hot? Yes, it is. So onto the books. Disclaimer, these are all books that I read pre-living alone. I haven't really lived here long enough yet to have built up a selection of books that I can say definitely worked for me living by myself. But these are all books that I've been inspired to pick back up lately and that I found amazingly helpful in general for my mental health at the time that I read them, and I think will be particularly relevant now. The first one is Quarantine Comix. So this was a memoir of life in lockdown. So this is specifically about the first UK COVID lockdown. And I found this book amazing to read because it just described exactly what so many of us went through. And actually, I can't even really say that myself. I had a very good experience of the first lockdown because I ended up getting locked down with my family. So I wasn't isolated, and we were in a house that had a garden, so we had outside space. So my experience of the first lockdown was a lot easier to manage than so many other people's that I know. But that doesn't mean it didn't still affect my mental health. And then the subsequent lockdowns, I was back in Croydon, so in a much more confined space, and it's really hard on your mental health. So this book is a graphic novel that's all about the artist Rachael Smith's experiences of struggling with her mental health during lockdown. And I found so much of this to ring so true, both from my experiences in lockdown, but also I think will just be relevant to living by myself. One of the things I really enjoyed in this book is her visual representation of her depression. So you can see on the cover here, she has these two imaginary characters in the book, as well as some real characters, two imaginary dogs, one called Barky and one called Friendly. The one called Friendly represents Rachel's common sense and optimism, and can tell Rachael good and useful things, so that's great. Baki represents her depression and pessimism, and he comes along and says really unhelpful and mean things. And I just really related to that idea of having these sort of imaginary creatures that follow me around and talk to me and mostly say mean things. And so I liked the idea of actually taking that horrible voice and turning it into something like an imaginary dog that you can just say, shut up and go away to. I would never say shut up and go away to a dog. Oh, I love dogs. Another graphic novel, this is a really cute one, The Life-Changing Manga of Tidying Up. So this is Marie Kondo, you know, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. This is a graphic novel about that. So it's fiction, it's got a fictional story about a woman sorting out her life, but it's also got little tips throughout it. And I don't know why, but when I read this book for the first time, it made me cry. I honestly was very surprised at it at the time that it happened. I read this about 2 years ago, I guess, and I'm not a tidy person, but I'm also not like a hopelessly messy person. I didn't think that mess was particularly relevant or featured very highly in my life and emotions, but for some reason this book did make me cry, because I just loved the idea of making this woman making her home spark joy for her. So this is definitely one that I'm going to read again now that I'm living in this space that's just mine, so I can see how to make it spark the most joy for me. A book that I haven't got a physical copy of, I read it on Scribd, and I only part liked it, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, was All Along You Were Blooming by, is her name Morgan Harper Nichols? Yes, her name is Morgan Harper Nichols. So she is a designer, and this book is filled with really beautiful images and words of wisdom. And I only found some of it to be useful or relevant to me because, so Morgan Harper Nichols is very religious, and a lot of the book was about her faith, and those bits I just didn't connect to as someone who's not personally religious. But some of the other sections were just like really lovely, genuinely inspiring words, really nice ways to talk to yourself. And I mentioned that I kind of have this voice that's so mean to me all the time. It's really nice to be able to have these beautiful images. I've started following her on Instagram, these beautiful images that I can look at and rephrase some of the ways that I talk to myself. Another book that I don't have, because I left it behind in the move, so I need to go back and get it, is my Postsecret book. So there are loads of these. I think there's at least 3 or 4. I've just got one of them, but I also used to read the Postsecret blog every Sunday. I should start doing that again. I find that looking at these really helps with my mental health because you get to uncover such a huge range of experiences that other people are having, and some of them you'll find, oh, there's someone else going through this same thing that I'm going through, and some people are going through something so much worse or just so different that it just puts everything into perspective. If you don't know what Postsecret is, it's this project that's been going for years and years where people anonymously write their secrets onto little postcards, and they decorate them and write them in amazing ways and post them to Frank, who then puts them up on his blog and also publishes books full of them. And so it's just this collection of human experiences and human anxieties and worries and the things that we feel shame about that we don't want to tell anybody else, and then seeing them laid out there and finding that you also do that thing, and that maybe you don't need to feel that much shame about it because there's so many other people with other worries and secrets of their own, is just, I find, a really reassuring, comforting thing. So I'm going to start looking at that blog again every Sunday morning. I've talked a lot about the book Just Eat It and How to Just Eat It, which is the follow-up, which is more of like a practical workbook. But this is one that I definitely think is going to be very helpful for me to survive living alone. So I do have a lot of issues around food, as I feel like most of us do. Honestly, why is something that's just there to keep us alive so complicated? And I am worried that living alone is going to make that more difficult for me because there's no one there to see what I'm eating and for me to at least try and act normal in front of. So I'm going to pick this workbook back up and dive back into it because I was finding this really amazing. I read the first book, Just Eat It, a few years ago, and I just loved it so much. Again, that was one that made me cry and I wasn't expecting to, because it's so kindly written and so understanding. So the author, Laura Thomas, is not at all judgmental. She's not telling you what to do. She's not telling you off for having all of this diet culture having changed the way you think about food throughout your whole life, because of course it has, because we've been absolutely bombarded with it for years, and she doesn't expect you to change overnight. She says it's going to take a while to undo a lot of the damage that has been done to you by all of these messages. And so I really appreciated that very gentle approach. I do a lot of beating myself up about my relationship with food. There's that mean voice again. That voice is always there, especially when it comes to what I'm eating. And so having a really kind approach to making food more joyful and less complicated. Finding food freedom is how she puts it on the front here. The last book that I have here to show you is a puzzle book. I find that puzzle books are really great for my mental health because they give me something to really focus on, and it quietens down all of the buzzing around that was going on in my head because I don't have time to think about that. I've got a puzzle to do. I love puzzles of all shapes and sizes, really. The one that I've got here, this was a Christmas present from my dad this year. This is the Shipping Forecast puzzle book. It's fantastic. It's so niche. I never knew anything about the shipping forecast. But in this one, you get a little map and you get to solve clues, and then you draw shapes on the map and find words in there. It's genius. I don't have time to have depression when I'm doing these puzzles. Oh yeah, on that note, that was something that I was going to say at the beginning of this video. Books are fantastic at helping with your mental health, but not a replacement for getting the proper help that you need. So I talked about therapy. I also am personally on antidepressants. That is very necessary for me to keep managing my mental health at the moment. I've done videos where I've talked more in depth about my own personal mental health before, and I will link both of those below. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Books are magic, but they're not actually magic, so if you need professional help, you should get some. I started trying to make a list for this video of fiction books that have helped with my mental health, and I actually decided not to put that in because it's so subjective that I don't think it would even really be useful at all, because I think when you're going through some mental health struggles, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but sometimes reading certain books might not be helpful. For example, I read A Little Life when I came off my antidepressants for a while. It's a terrible idea. I went back on them. I also have read The Bell Jar multiple times in my life. It's a fantastic book. I love it. But certain times I've read it, it has made me think that I'm having a psychotic breakdown. I've talked in videos before at some point about how the book that most helped me with my mental health was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Chbosky. And it really did. It made such a huge difference. I read it when I was 19. I was really struggling with all sorts of thoughts. And for some reason, that book was just exactly what I needed at that time and basically just cured me. But I wouldn't prescribe it. I don't know why it worked for me at that time. There was something in it that connected with me at that point. I wouldn't suggest it would help anybody else's mental health. I think it was very specific and niche. So I can't really give recommendations of fiction to help, other than that I do think fiction can help. Fiction can help with a multitude of things, and it can help with feeling lonely, and it can help with feeling anxious and depressed. Finding stories to relate to can be wonderful. Finding stories to escape into can be wonderful. Something I've really been enjoying doing recently is like buddy reading. So buddy reading is really big on YouTube anyway. So you can either do like an official buddy reading along at the same pace with someone, but also I've just been reading books roughly at the same time as someone else, or even right after they've read them, and just knowing that someone else has just read this and being able to talk to them about it is really lovely and gives you a really nice bit of connection. So that helps with feeling lonely. Why is it that my tea was too hot, and now it's gone cold? Other things that I do that I find really help on bad mental health days for me: cooking. That one's a bit like the puzzle book one. It just gives me something else to focus on. I like having a recipe to follow. All I have to do is follow the steps, one after another. Don't have to think about any of the other million worries in my head. So I find that cooking always really calms me down. Listening to music. Listening to music, a bit like with reading books, can be a tricky one because sometimes listening to music can make me feel more unhappy if I pick songs that are too melodramatic, or if I pick songs that are too happy. Sometimes if I'm really sad, I need to listen to sad songs. Sometimes I need to listen to happy songs. It changes every day. There's no magic formula except for one for me, which is that it always helps to put on a song from the soundtrack of a musical and sing along very loudly. That has never failed me in any way. A lot of people that I've spoken to who have also lived by themselves suggested just watching a lot of TV. They said that that's what they've done a lot of. That doesn't really work for me. Generally, I find that watching TV when I'm by myself just makes me feel more by myself, because I love watching TV with other people. That's not always the case. I've definitely found that there are some days I just want to binge watch some crappy TV show that no one else would ever watch with me and I have the best time. But usually I'm not a big solo TV watcher, but I do find that YouTube is a slightly better companion for me when I'm by myself. Maybe it's because you feel like the YouTuber is talking more directly to you, but I like to put YouTube up on my TV and then I could sit and watch that for hours. So I would love to know if you have any more recommendations, books or otherwise, that you've found have really helped your mental health, whether it's living alone and feeling isolated or whatever else you've been struggling with. Your girl's got a lot of mental health issues, so I'd probably find it useful. So I'd love to read more books like that. Do put them in the comments below. I will say I don't want to talk at the moment about why I'm living by myself, so if you could refrain from talking about that in the comments, that would be very helpful, because I won't find reading those comments helpful for my mental state. So I would really appreciate not having those in the comment section, if you wouldn't mind. And thank you so much again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Once again, my link is betterhelp.com/drinkingbymyshelf. That's betterhelp.com/drinkingbymyshelf, and I'll put the link below so you can click through and go and get 10% off your first month and start making your life get better starting now. Also, thank you to all of you for bearing with me while I've been a little bit AWOL for a while. I'm back. I'm here. I'm gonna do this for you.
Picnic with my best friends. We start to plan what we will do. Now life's back in control.